Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Two important announcements. Number one, we are planning a YouTube live session. All you need to do, go to the community section of our YouTube channel. There are 4 topics provided. Click on one of these 4 topics and the topic which receives the highest number of votes will have the YouTube live session on that topic. Number 2, the video lecture on Katowice Climate Summit shall be uploaded on our YouTube channel by tomorrow 10 p.m. Now let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper, beginning with a news item on page number 1 of the Delhi edition of The Hindu, charge sheet filed in sedition case against Kanhaiya and 2 others. These students are accused of raising anti-India slogans 3 years ago. Now let's understand the context. 3 years ago at JNU, some slogans were raised. Slogans such as Kashmir ki azadi tak jang rahegi, till Kashmir is liberated we shall fight, Bharat ki barbadi tak jang rahegi, till India is destroyed we shall fight. A police complaint was filed and the then president of JNU Students Union, Kanhaiya Kumar, was arrested along with student activist Omar Khalid and few others. Now 3 years later, a charge sheet has been filed against them in this sedition case. Now let's understand what this sedition law is all about, beginning with the history of this sedition law. Section 124 capital A of Indian Penal Code talks about sedition. When Indian Penal Code was drafted in 1860s, sedition was not originally part of it. Sedition was added to the Indian Penal Code in the year 1870. And at that point in time, the Wahhabi movement was going on. So Wahhabi movement becomes an important potential question that can be asked in your prelims 2019. But what is the text of the sedition law? Whosoever through his words, whether these words are spoken or in written format, if through these words you are promoting either hatred or contempt or disaffection, against whom? Against the government established by law, then you shall be booked under sedition and you can be sentenced to 3 years in jail or life imprisonment in jail, to which a fine can also be added. But what was the principal objective of the sedition law? We were under illegal British occupation and we had to overthrow this British rule. We had to wage a battle, an ideological battle against the British rule because it was an illegal rule. But the first step had to be propaganda. That means we had to carry on with our educative propaganda. We had to educate the masses that we are under illegal foreign occupation and we had to overthrow this illegal British occupation. How can we carry on this propaganda? Through speeches, through articles, through writings, through newspapers. It is through these means that we can educate the masses and we can inform and educate these people that we have to come together on a single platform and launch a struggle for India's independence. The British soon realized that if we allow Indians to carry on with this educative propaganda, our days in India are numbered and we have to criminalize their freedom of speech and expression. And for this very purpose, the sedition law was incorporated in Indian Penal Code, and the primary objective was that we have to somehow prevent nationalist feelings from getting developed amongst the Indians. Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad and Mahatma Gandhi, these are the prominent personalities who were booked under sedition. Bal Gangadhar Tilak pleaded before the judge that he is not promoting disaffection against the government established by law. The judge said, yes, you are not promoting disaffection against the government established by law. But in you, what we are seeing an absence of affection. And it is this absence of affection that renders you eligible for a term of 6 years under sedition. And Tilak was sentenced to 6 years in jail. But when Mahatma Gandhi was booked under sedition after the non-cooperation movement, he pleaded guilty. He said this government is cruel, and for every right-thinking individual it is the duty to promote disaffection against that cruel government. But then India got independence and we were busy framing the new constitution for the people of this country. A committee on fundamental rights was headed by Sardar Patel. What Sardar Patel's committee did? Sardar Patel's committee added sedition as one of the grounds on which freedom of speech and expression under Article 19, Clause 1, Clause A can be restricted. That means Constitution would have provided us freedom of speech and expression, but it was not meant to be absolute. There would be reasonable restrictions on your freedom of speech and expression. One such restriction was sedition. But when sedition as a ground for restriction on your freedom of speech and expression was introduced in the draft constitution, many people in the Constituent Assembly protested. In fact, one member of the Constituent Assembly asked Sardar Patel that previously we feared the government of the British. Now do we have to fear the government of the people of this country as well? And ultimately sedition ground was dropped. That means sedition was not mentioned as the reasonable restriction under your freedom of speech and expression. That means of all the grounds on which your freedom of speech and expression can be restricted, sedition is not one of those grounds. That means currently we have 8 grounds of reasonable restriction on your freedom of speech and expression. One is public order, sovereignty of the country, contempt of court, incitement to violence, so on and so forth. But sedition is not that ground. But then sedition is still mentioned under 124 capital A of Indian Penal Code. Indian Penal Code is a law that is currently in force in this country. But what about Article 13? Article 13 of the Indian Constitution says that any law, even if it has been passed before the independence, if this law is in agreement with fundamental rights chapter under part 3 of Indian Constitution, this law will be valid. But if this law violates the fundamental rights provided under part 3 of Indian Constitution, it will be declared unconstitutional. Matter went to the court in a famous case called Kedarnath Singh versus State of Bihar. In this case, the constitutional validity of the sedition law was challenged. But Supreme Court said the sedition law under Indian Penal Code is valid. But we will narrow down the interpretation of the sedition law. We cannot have sedition as well as freedom of speech and expression in the same breath. That means we will give precedence to freedom of speech and expression. But if you are using your freedom of speech and expression to incite people to violence, then you can be booked under sedition and you can be sentenced to 3 years in jail or life imprisonment. Because if you're inciting people to violence, you are also violating public order. And since public order is one of the reasonable restrictions under Article 19 Clause 2 on which your freedom of speech and expression can be restricted, in that case, the constitutional validity of sedition law is intact, but we are narrowing down the interpretation of sedition. You can say whatever you want to say, but don't incite people to violence. Then we entered into 1980s. Operation Blue Star was launched because there were Khalistani terrorists present inside the Golden Temple, and we had to flush out these terrorists, and Operation Blue Star was launched. Then Indira Gandhi got assassinated by her Sikh bodyguards. Then the slogans were raised. Raj Karega Khalsa, Khalistan Zindabad. Because there was a section of Sikh community in Punjab which wanted an independent state, independent country called Khalistan for the Sikhs. Those people who raised these slogans such as Khalistan Zindabad, Raj Karega Khalsa, they were also arrested. And they were booked under sedition for promoting disaffection against the government established by law. Matter went to the court. Balwant Singh case 1995. Supreme Court said mere slogans, no matter how unpalatable these slogans are, they won't be deemed as sedition because you have the freedom of speech and expression. Unless and until you are inciting people to violence, unless and until you are calling people to raise arms to overthrow the government of the day, then you can be booked under sedition. All these people were set free. Then came the landmark case, Shreya Singhal versus Union of India in 2015. And it was in this case that perhaps for the first time Supreme Court defined what speech primarily is all about. Supreme Court said, through your words, through your spoken words or written words, you can advocate whatever you want to advocate. You can propagate whatever you want to propagate, but don't incite people to violence. That means advocating any idea is your freedom of speech and expression. Propagating any idea is your freedom of speech and expression, but you can't incite people to violence. If because of your speeches there is breakdown of public order, you are violating the peace and tranquility in the state, then only you can be booked under sedition. So the law is clear. The Supreme Court rulings are clear. No matter how unpalatable the speeches are, the words are, including the cringe-worthy slogans such as Bharat ki barbadi tak jang rahegi, that is not sedition, because the Supreme Court is clear. Unless and until you are inciting people to violence, you won't be charged with sedition. But although the law and the Supreme Court rulings are clear, still we have seen that this sedition law is being misused by the police. We saw the student activists in JNU were arrested. We also saw activists in Assam who are protesting against the Citizenship Amendment Bill. They have been also booked under sedition. We have seen people from Arundhati Roy to Hardik Patel. They have been booked under sedition. And that is why Law Commission in its report said that we have to have a relook at this entire sedition law. And that is why many people today are asking for that this sedition law should be altogether scrapped. It's a relic of colonial era and it should be thrown into the dustbins of the history. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at another news item on page number 1, relevant for your GS paper 1, Society of India. It talks about the Devadasi system. What is this Devadasi custom? It is the custom where young girls are offered to the temple gods. That means as an offering to the temple god, the young girl, she dedicates her entire life to the temple god. And this practice was considered to be exploitative as well, and that is how it was banned. There are classical dances such as Bharatnatyam, Odissi. They owe their origin to the Devadasi system in India. These young girls were sexually assaulted and exploited by the temple priest because of this Devadasi practice, and ultimately it was banned. Now a study has been conducted by National Law School of India University in Bangalore and Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai. This report says that Karnataka passed a law way back in 1982 to ban the practice of Devadasi system. But even till date, the rules have not been passed to implement this law. But the disturbing aspect revealed by this report is that special children, that means those girls with physical disabilities or mental disabilities, they are more vulnerable to be dedicated as Devadasis for the temple gods. That's one disturbing aspect of this. At the same time, the practice of dedicating young girls to the temples as offering so that you can please the god, it is now persisting not only in Karnataka but also in Goa. The report points out that girls from poor background, they are more vulnerable to be offered as Devadasis to the temple gods. The report further says that there is a sufficient evidence of the prevalence of the practice of Devadasi and the sexual exploitation of the women. Despite a clear link between the Devadasi system and the sexual exploitation of women or the girls, the laws in India such as POCSO, juvenile justice, they fail to mention Devadasi as one form of sexual exploitation of children. That means these children who are dedicated as Devadasis, they are not treated as those children who are in need of care and protection. Why? Because our juvenile justice law talks about two kinds of children. Children who are in conflict with the law and those who are in need of care and protection. That means this juvenile justice law fails to treat Devadasi children as those children who are in need of care and protection. In your examination, you can be asked about the way forward. How can we eradicate this practice of Devadasi system in India? One solution is that we will have to enhance the livelihood sources for these weaker sections of the society, for these poor, so that the families are not forced to offer their young girls as Devadasis to the temple gods. That's number one. And we also have to overhaul our legislative framework, and we have to include these children who are offered as Devadasis as those children who are in need of care and protection. That is what this newspaper article is all about. Now let's look at another news item on page number 2 of the Delhi edition of the Hindu. Few days ago, we talked about a study released by Research Institute for Compassionate Economics, RICE. This report said that there is an increase in the number of toilets constructed. But even then, those people who have toilets at their homes, they are still defecating in the open. That means the percentage of the people who continue to defecate in the open, it was about 23% in 2014, and it is the same 23% in 2018 as well. That means our entire focus of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan has been towards constructing more and more toilets, and we have still failed to change the behavior of the people. Now the same study talks about another reason why the number of toilets constructed have increased in this country, particularly in rural India. The survey is titled Changes in Open Defecation in Rural North India 2014 to 2018. The report says that it is because of coercion that the number of toilets constructed in northern rural India have increased. People are being coerced through fines, through naming and shaming, and if a particular family is entitled to some benefits, for example scholarships, for example old age pension, these benefits are withheld. That means first you construct the toilet and then we will release the benefits that you are entitled to. It is this coercion that is used for toilet construction. But the Sanitation Ministry, or the Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation, which implements the Swachh Bharat Mission Rural, it says that this study is misleading and does not reflect the ground reality. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at another newspaper article on page number 7. Housing for All scheme was launched, or Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. It was launched in the year 2015. And the target of this Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana for urban India, because it's also in rural India, but for urban area, the target was that we will have 20 million affordable houses for people by the year 2022. But now the data says that we have achieved only the 10% of this target. What is the reason? The reason is that in India, the developers take 3 to 4 years to complete a project. But we need houses to be completed in less time, in quick time, and possibly in 4 to 5 months. Now for that, a challenge has been launched. A challenge called Global Housing Technology Challenge. The aim of this challenge is to introduce best technologies to construct the houses quickly, and that too at a lower cost. 6 winners will design and build projects of 1,000 housing units each. And the state and the center each will provide an assistance of 1.5 lakh rupees as well. But there is something else. If we need more houses, not only should these houses be constructed quickly, but at the same time, the construction of these houses should have minimal impact on our environment, on our climate. And for that, we need to use green technologies as well. So another section of this challenge is to identify those future technologies which are not currently in the market, but those future technologies which can help in building houses quickly, and that too with minimal impact on the environment. And for such ideas, incubation support shall be provided with 4 of the IITs in India. That is what this newspaper article is all about. Now let's look at some of the editorials and columns from today's newspaper. There is an editorial on sedition, and that is something that we discussed in the beginning. This editorial also talks about that the right course is to scrap section 124A, a relic of the colonial era altogether. Now let's look at another editorial on page number 8, job half done. It talks about the single-use plastics. What are these single-use plastics? These are the plastics or disposable plastics that are used only once before they are thrown away or they are recycled. For example, soda and water bottles, food packaging, carry bags, cups, plates, cutlery, so on and so forth. Last year, India made a pledge that we will beat plastic pollution. And the pledge was that we will eliminate the use of these single-use plastics by 2022. Can be a potential statement for your prelims examination. 22 states and union territories have joined the fight and they have announced the ban on single-use plastics. And it has been a success. For example, a Bangalore Waste Collective estimates that the volume of plastic waste that they collected, it has dropped from 2 tons a day to less than 100 kg today. That means this ban has been effective. But what this editorial talks about, what about the plastic waste from packaging of food or cosmetics or groceries or the goods that are delivered by Flipkart or Amazon, for example? If you buy online from Flipkart or Amazon, some of the products that you buy are wrapped in this single-use plastics. And it is this waste plastic from these areas that remains unaddressed. There were rules issued in 2016 called Plastic Waste Management Rules. These rules, they were notified the same year as well. These rules made it clear that the producers, the importers, as well as the brand owners, they have the responsibility that they have to collect the plastic back that they have introduced into the environment. That means if Flipkart and Amazon, they package their goods in these single-use plastics, it is their responsibility to take this plastic back from the environment. Or it is the responsibility of that plastic manufacturer to take this plastic out of the environment. But it is this aspect that is lacking as of now. The editorial says that this calls urgent action. Government should show the same resolve here as they have done in imposing the ban. That is what this editorial is all about. Now there is another column on page number 8, Science and Reason. It talks about the Indian Science Congress. In our 9th January Hindu newspaper analysis, I discussed an issue called regaining respect. Please watch that lecture, then you don't need to read this newspaper column. And the timing of that lecture is 52 minutes 42 seconds. Please watch that lecture. Now let's look at another column on page number 9, preventing suicides. 49 students have committed suicide in Navodaya Vidyalaya schools in the last 5 years. Last year in Kota Coaching Hub, 3 students committed suicide in a span of 4 days. These developments forced the policy makers and activists to look at the issue of student suicides afresh. But why are the students committing suicides? Reasons are many. The principal reason is the fear of exams. Fear of exam is one such reason. Second is that teachers are also mocking the students. Teachers mocking the students in the classroom if they fail to submit assignments or if they fail to answer questions. This guilt or this shame is what drives many to commit suicides. Third reason is ragging. Ragging in schools and colleges, that is another reason. Fourth is family pressure. Parents forcing kids to opt for courses that are so-called socially acceptable. Doctors, engineers, nothing more than that. We are fast becoming a society where even a 90% marks is a shame because Sharma ji ka ladka scored 99%. This family pressure drains a child emotionally and ultimately drives him to end his life. Fifth reason is caste discrimination in the schools or colleges. Rohit Vemula, for example, a Dalit, because of his caste bias in the university in Hyderabad, he killed himself. But who is to be blamed? Our educational system. And the solution to prevent these suicides also rests with our educational system. What is the purpose of education overall? The overall purpose of education is the development of mind, body and soul. That is what Swami Vivekananda called for. But today education is viewed only in terms of jobs, because it is through decent jobs that an individual can grow socially, culturally, as well as economically. But today we say youth is literate, educated, but still unemployable. It is the absence of a decent job opportunity also that is forcing youth to end their lives. That is why we need more guidance, we need more counseling in our schools, coaching centers, colleges to prevent rising suicide in the country. But the government is not allocating more funds in this area, and that's a shame. We have Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan, we have Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, we have teacher education. All these have now been clubbed together. All these schemes have been integrated together now. But the total budget has not increased much, which means that funds which were earmarked for guidance and counseling, now these funds will be diverted to other areas such as recruitment, such as infrastructure, laboratories, libraries, so on and so forth. Because even today, we consider counseling and guidance as non-productive area. The writer talks about the way forward. And the way forward is, forget about the committees. Each time there is a crisis, we set up one committee after another and forget to implement the report of these committees. For example, one such committee was Rupanwal Commission, and we didn't implement the report. The writer in fact says that even counseling in schools have failed. But I guess this is only partly true. We still need counselors for the suicide prevention in schools. The writer says that our syllabus should lay stress on meditation. For example, Delhi government's happiness curriculum. That is something which is very good. Rupanwal Commission had recommended equal opportunity cells, and these equal opportunity cells should have anti-discrimination officer functional in all colleges and universities, so that this caste bias is also eradicated and people are not forced to commit suicides. That is what this newspaper column is all about. Now let's look at some of the prelims based questions. Number one, which of the following statements is or are correct? People's Union for Civil Liberties is a human rights body formed in India in 1976. Yes, it was formed by J. Prakash Narayanan. Both the statements are correct. PUCL was formed as People's Union for Civil Liberties and Democratic Rights in 1976, and this name was changed in 1980 to People's Union for Civil Liberties. What is the context? Encounter deaths in UP is a serious issue, notes the Supreme Court of India, and a petition was filed by this NGO, People's Union for Civil Liberties. That is why this question has been asked. Map-based question, this country is bounded on the north by the Black Sea and on the southwest and west by the Mediterranean Sea. This country is predominantly mountainous. This country lies partly in Asia and partly in Europe. The country referred to in the above is Turkey. This is the explanation, and the context is this. US will devastate Turkey's economy if Kurds are attacked. Previous year's prelims based question, which of the following statements best describe carbon fertilization? Increased plant growth due to increased concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That is what carbon fertilization is all about. Because carbon fertilization effect suggests that the increase of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere increases the rate of photosynthesis in the plants, and that is what this carbon fertilization is all about. Mains based question, 200 words. Sedition law is an unwanted relic of colonial era and needs to be junked. Comment. That is it from our newspaper analysis today. Thank you for being with us. Have a great day.